Good morning, everybody. And welcome back to the Supported Space session. For those who didn't attend any of the morning sessions, my name's Luke Griggs and I'm the Chief Executive of Hebway UK. I'm delighted to be here with you all today. Next up then in this area is Douglas McAndrew from Digby Brown, who's going to talk to us about benefits, your questions answered. Douglas is a senior welfare rights manager at Digby Brown and brings an extensive experience of working with people with brain injury on navigating the benefits and social support system, helping to clarify what can be a very confusing area. So please join me in welcoming Douglas.
Thank you, Luke. Morning, everyone. I hope you're having a good day so far. You'll all be eager to get your lunch. It's been a very long day for some of you, I'm sure. A wee bit of food for thought before we go to the lunch break. Yes, as Luke said, for those of you who don't know me, my name's Douglas McAndrew. I am the Senior Welfare Rights Manager at Digby Brown. I am going to talk to you today about the latest news on the subject of Social Security. Oh yes, it's static. I had my timer on and is going because my biggest challenge will be to actually shut up after 50 minutes, because if you do know me, you'll know that I can talk about this stuff for hours. I'm going to talk about 3 different subjects today, beginning with Social Security Scotland. I'm then going to talk about the Universal Credit Managed Migration, and I'm going to finish with a couple of bits of legislation that have been introduced and some of the changes that they might introduce. So, Social Security Scotland was set up a few years ago now, and they have been engaged in a process of taking on responsibility for a number of disability benefits which, up until the creation of Social Security Scotland, were managed by the DWP for the UK government. So what we have now is a suite of disability benefits from childhood into old age that are delivered and managed by Social Security Scotland. So the old personal independence payment, which in turn replaced disability living allowance, is now adult disability payment in Scotland. We have a rather niche benefit called the Scottish Adult Disability Living Allowance. Not many cases of this. Essentially, that was put together for people that might have very, very long-term or indefinite awards of DLA, and rather than putting them through the process of moving them to a new benefit, they've essentially just created an equivalent. These might be people with the low rates of the DLA that don't exist in PIP and adult disability payment. We also have the Child Disability Living Allowance, which has now been turned into Child Disability Payment through Social Security Scotland. And finally, we have Pension Age Disability Payment, formerly known as Attendance Allowance from the DWP. Over the last few years, they've basically introduced a system whereby if you need to make a new benefit claim after a certain cut-off point, it would be a claim for one of these new Scottish benefits rather than its UK equivalent. And along with that approach for new claims, they have been carrying out this process of case transfer, which is almost complete now. The goal is to have essentially the last few cases of attendance allowance transferred over to pension age disability payment. That was the last one to be introduced. So by the end of the year, they hope that all of the old claims, the old DWP claims, have been turned into the Scottish equivalents. Once that's done, they're going to introduce a system whereby if you are living in a different part of the UK and you move to Scotland and you've got one of these UK benefits like personal independence payment, what you're going to have to do is make a brand new claim for its Scottish equivalent. There won't be any case transfer process. your entitlement to that old UK benefit will simply end after a period of time. As far as the outcomes are concerned for these benefits, the truth is that they are much the same at this point as their UK equivalents. All of these benefits, for the most part, are identical to their UK equivalents. The questions are the same, the way that they score them is the same. The point of difference that Social Security Scotland emphasised was that more emphasis would be placed on medical evidence. One of the bits of PIP that was despised was the so-called healthcare assessment that was often carried out by someone who didn't have the necessary skills and experience, especially when you're talking about the brain-injured community and the complexities and the challenges that they face. These healthcare assessments were often not fit for purpose, so the Scottish Government decided to do away with these, and so they have in the vast majority of cases. They are making their decisions based more on medical evidence the claimant provides. So it's really, really important when you're going through an assessment, a new claim or review for one of the Scottish benefits to dig out all the old medical evidence you have, even if it's not necessarily current. If your brain injury happened many, many years ago, there won't necessarily be a lot of current stuff going on, but you can refer to previous medical evidence. And the rates of success, as I say, are more or less the same. As of the end of July, 46% of adult disability payment claims were successful on initial application, which is much the same as PIP. If people got a decision they were unhappy with and they wanted to ask for a redetermination, again, as of the end of July, about 49% of those redeterminations led to a new and improved award, which is a slightly better rate of success compared to the mandatory reconsiderations that people would need to ask of a PIP decision. And finally, in terms of appeals, around about 54% of cases that go to the Scottish Tribunals system for arbitration, if the redetermination comes back and you're not happy with it, around 54% of those appeals have been upheld. Some aspects of the decision-making in the absence of a healthcare assessment have been a wee bit questionable. Things like case discussions I've seen in ADP case files, which are really inadequate. So, as I say, the main emphasis is just making sure that you have got the information there and available. Besides the disability benefits, I'll just touch on some of the other Social Security benefits, Social Security Scotland benefits that are in place at the moment. We have the pension age winter heating payment. This was a response to the decision by the UK government, which they have since U-turned on, to restrict payment of the winter fuel grant to people that were in receipt of means tested benefit, i.e. pension credit. Turns out an awful lot of people that were entitled to that benefit did not have it. So that was a bit of a mess last year. Scottish Government have pledged to introduce a new payment that will be between £101.70 and £305.10 this winter, depending on your circumstances. You don't need to do anything. Essentially, they're going to send letters out to people in November telling them what their entitlement is, so no action required. The carer support payment replaces carers allowance. Not any significant changes there. That's a benefit that people can claim if they've got full-time care responsibilities for somebody that's in receipt of one of the previous disability payments. There is a top-up payment available to the carer support payment, the carers support supplement. It's around about £300 that's paid in June and December, just to make the value of that benefit a wee bit higher. We've got the before that, the funeral support payment, which is a replacement for its DWP equivalent. Again, there, it's a little bit more generous. So the average payment for the funeral support payment is £2,065, and then the application process is a bit less intrusive than its DWP equivalent. Then the 5 family payments are the so-called Best Start grants. Again, these are quite targeted and niche, and they were introduced, for example, for for new parents, to help low-income families get food with the Best Start food grant. And then we have the Scottish Child Payment, which is £27.15, which is a means-tested payment available to low-income families with dependent kids. The next thing on the list is the Employment Injury Assistance Scheme, which is going to replace Industrial Injuries Disablement Benefit, which is quite a big one. That's a benefit that's available for people that have an injury or an accident in work. The scheme seeks to modernise industrial injuries disablement benefit a bit and bring it into the modern workplace, but plans for that are still to be decided. The final note there is the Social Security Amendment Scotland Act 2025. I'll talk about that a wee bit at the end. It's just one or two wee changes there technically on the way that things like tribunals are managed. The other thing, or the next thing that I'm going to talk about is the so-called managed migration. A lot of work for us this year as the final stage of the process of getting rid of legacy benefits is about to be completed. So the legacy benefits include the two forms of tax credits: housing benefit, income support, income-related employment support allowance, and income-related job seekers allowance. Universal credit basically brings these 6 benefits together. Almost 8 million people now on universal credit. As many as 338,000 people have been sent a migration notice saying you need to now claim universal credit because your old benefits are going to close, have not bothered. And these are people that are likely to have entitlement, possibly even higher entitlement than other universal credit, and they've just simply chosen not to do it. The next bullet point there about so-called transitional protection, this is really around the pledge from the DWP to guarantee that people would not be worse off when making the change from their legacy benefits to universal credit. The issue there has been, when we look at some of the legacy benefits, particularly employment support allowance, income related, it's wrong. So entitlement has not been calculated accurately. There's perhaps been a change of circumstances that's led to higher entitlement that hasn't been picked up. So there's a number of cases where we've had to fix ESA entitlement to make sure that when migration to UC happens, they get the right amount of money. The plan is to complete this process by March next year and essentially have all these old cases closed. This last cohort of people on employment support allowance, they recognise that's a particularly vulnerable group of people, so they've pledged not to close any old claims down. They will write to you, they will say you've got a 12-week deadline to start your UC claim. If you don't do that, that then prompts the so-called enhanced customer support journey, which basically means you'll be contacted by the DWP. They'll try and offer a bit more hands-on support, potentially even visiting people at home if that's what they need to do. So the advice on that essentially is, if you've not went through this process, you will be contacted. When you do go through this process, it is as a digital by default benefit prompt a wee bit more in the way of an adjustment in terms of managing it, because it's a paperless process. They won't send you letters and things like that. So it's just ideally something that you want to get a wee hand with if you haven't done it already. Things to bear in mind if you haven't went through the process yet. This is just, if you like, a wee checklist. It does rely on having an email account and a mobile phone number to set the universal credit claim up. And as I said, I've got a few cases where entitlement is wrong, so you do want to check that that's correct and get advice if you can. One of the issues that I've discovered is around capital. The capital limits are the same. If you have capital or savings of under £6,000, it doesn't affect entitlement to UC. If it's over £16,000, you do not have any entitlement to UC as a means-tested benefit. If it's between 6 and 16,000, there's a formula that tapers away entitlement. Now, I've got a couple of people, quite vulnerable people, that have got accrued benefits in their bank accounts that are over this lower £6,000 limit. And it's simply because they've got all their entitlements, they're at the right level, but they're quite limited in their ability to spend. And this has been challenging. I mean, there are ways in which you can dispose of capital, for example, if you're sitting in your house and you need to do things like refresh the decoration, get new furniture, get new white goods, or things like that. That's a legitimate way of reducing that balance, but again, it's something to be aware of. Identity verification is a bit of a snag as well. At the end of a universal credit claim, you'll be invited to try and verify your identity online. You can use a passport or a driving licence to do that. For those that don't have those documents, the DWP will ask you to provide other paperwork and, you know, potentially ask you to go to the job centre. They can, again, though, for the most vulnerable people, come and visit you at home, but a UC claim can't be processed and put into payment until they confirm you are who you say you are. So, yeah, these are just a few bits and pieces that you need to bear in mind if you've yet to go through this process. The last thing I'm going to talk about are a couple of changes that are coming down the road. The only constant when it comes to welfare rights is that it's in a constant state of change for lots of different reasons. You know, I was speaking to our new media manager, Felicity, and she mentioned the fact that there's a Holyrood direction coming in May next year, and a part of that manifesto will address social security. A new story in the BBC just today that she showed me was about a £770 million deficit between the Scottish Government's spending on social security and the amount of money that they're given by the UK Government. As I said earlier, these disability benefits, the rate of approval is panning out to be much the same as their UK equivalents. The Scottish Government, despite a lot of very bold talk about fairness, dignity and respect and being more generous, have ran into the reality that if they want to be more generous, it means giving people more money. And the UK Government will say, well, you need to find that yourself, Scottish Government, because we will give you a settlement based on how our UK equivalents of these benefits that you deliver work. Besides this constant state of flux, you know, specifically, we have seen a bit of legislation come into law. Just a few days ago, the Universal Credit Act 2025, it used to be called the Universal Credit and Personal Independence Payment Act, but there was a proposal to radically change the criteria for entitlement to PIP, which, without going into details, if these proposed changes in this bit of legislation had been applied to the current caseload of PIP claimants at the moment, and these are people on the daily living component, it was about whether or not you can get the daily living component with a score of lower than 4 in 1 year individual activities. Something like 87% of PIP claimants would lose their entitlement. So something like that amount of money, that proportion of people had a PIP award that was based on a set of scores that did not include a 4-point descriptor. They abandoned this, I think, under pressure and with lobbying. So they've introduced some changes to universal credit. They're going to increase the standard allowance, going to be a bit more generous with that. The big issue is this cut to the so-called health element, because at the moment it's quite generous compared to employment and support allowance. If you're in the so-called support group that a lot of brain injured people will be in, where there's no conditionality, they don't ask you to do anything in return for your benefit. You get an additional £423 a month in universal credit on top of your standard allowance. It more than doubles it. They want to restrict this. They want to restrict this additional health element to people that are aged 22 or over. And they also want to scrap the work capability assessment. This is the process that will place you in this category where they don't ask you to do anything in return for your benefits and you get more money. They want to link entitlement to this new health element to entitlement to the daily living component of a disability benefit, PIP, or adult disability payment in Scotland. So essentially that means the work capability assessment will be scrapped. They point out that this duplicates the assessment that takes place for a disability benefit, although the two have different purposes. work capability assessment is obviously focused on difficulties in the workplace, whereas disability benefits are focused on difficulties in your home. So we shall see how that pans out in practice, but it's potentially problematic because it may mean a lot of people will lose their money. Sir Stephen Timms, who's a DWP minister, is going to conduct a review of PIP this year that potentially might see some big changes introduced. That'll be interesting because, again, if there are changes introduced to PIP as a DWP benefit, the Scottish Government will then need to make a decision on whether or not they want to adopt these same changes, and they'll need to think about things like cost implications. The final wee bullet point there is about the so-called pathways to work. Part of the reason they want to limit this additional health element to people at age 22 and over is they want to, as governments always have over the years, you know, they bemoan the fact that young people are not in education or training or employment. So they want to have this new pathway to work that places a far bigger emphasis on bringing those issues together and getting people into employment, which is laudable. But at the end of the day, especially when you're talking about people that have got a serious acquired brain injury or traumatic brain injury, it's simply not a conversation that you can have, and you know, that community has always been quite vulnerable to these assessment processes. The bigger issue, I think, very broadly, and it always comes down to politics and money. People like Gary Stevenson, who's an economist that I quite like, talks about inequality and, you know, issues, very, very high-level issues with government receipts. They don't have enough money to pay for the growing Social Security bill, so things like this pathways to work green paper, I think sometimes is offered as a bit of a smokescreen, because the big issue there is how do we pay for all these entitlements, and that is a question that I do not have an answer to. But in the meantime, all I can say is that if you've got any issues with benefit entitlement, do seek out welfare rights advice. I will be here for the rest of the day. I'll take a few questions just now. If you do have any specific issues about your own circumstances, you can come and find me on the Digby Brown stall in the exhibitor space, and you can also find Danny and Nicola sitting at the front. They thought that I wasn't going to mention them, but they're here as well. So Danny and Nicola also work with me at Digby Brown, and if you want to have a wee chat with them, they will be around for a wee while too. But if anyone's got any general questions about any of this stuff, I do appreciate it's a big information dump, but by all means shout out and I'll do my best to answer.
A couple of minutes for questions to Thor. Any?
Kind of, not exactly on this, but is being a beneficiary of a trust affect your payments?
If you have got a trust, the work that we do with personal injury, you can use a trust to deposit a compensation payment into, and that protects entitlement to means-tested benefits. If you're entitled to a non-means-tested benefit, and the disability benefits I spoke about at the beginning, like their UK equivalents, are not means-tested, so regardless of other earnings that you have or a partner has or capital or savings, it doesn't have any impact on it. But a personal injury trust is something that we advise our personal injury clients on if they want to protect their entitlements.
Thank you. Any other questions?
Hi, it's
just my benefits, obviously, I put in exchange to the new one. But the question I want to ask you now, I can't remember my other benefit, I think it's disability, I don't know. But the question, I am coming to retirement age in November, so I'll get my pension. What happens then? Because I don't know.
All right, so have you checked? Because this is another big issue. The age at which we can get our pensions will increase to 67 from next year, but you can go on and you can check. If you know it's going to be coming
November.
So the bit that you'll get is your state pension. It's about £230 a week at the moment. If you've paid your national insurance, that's what you'll get. People that are in a situation where they've got a disability benefit might then be able to apply for pension credit. And that is the income-based, the means-tested top-up that you can get on top of your state pension, if you've got a disability benefit, you're living alone, nobody's claiming carers allowance for looking after you, you may be able to get a wee top-up. Pensions are more generous than the working age benefit equivalents, but yeah.
And we've got a question at the back there.
It's two general points. When you talked about capital there, money in the bank, does that capital include the ownership of a house?
If it's a house, if it's your own house that you live in, your ordinary dwelling, then no. If you've got a second home, then that may be taken account of as an asset. Certainly if you've got tenants, for example, in a property and you're getting rent for them, but your own home, no.
Just you mentioned 338,000 people hadn't claimed a benefit. Is that in the UK or is that in Scotland? And is there any...
That's UK wide in the context of the universal credit.
Any research why?
I don't know. I found the figures, I think, in a bit of work that Child Poverty Action Group had done. I think it's probably just because a lot of people can't be bothered. Or they maybe think they'll get it wrong, they'll make a mistake, they don't have support or help, or they feel that they just don't need the money. So a variety of reasons.
I think certainly from Headway's point of view, the work we've done with disability benefits, I think the complexity is such a huge issue. When you look at the actual process of applying for PIP or DLA as it was before, whatever these things are, and the stress and anxiety that people go through, if you haven't got somebody to rely on to help you with this, it can be hugely daunting. And then when you get to the appeals process, to go through all that, so many of the brain injury survivors that we've spoken to through our survey say, well, look, I don't have the strength to go through that, and it's just easier. I'm just going to, hide away in the corner, and it's just too much to take on. And I think that's one of the arguments we continually put to government, whether it's at Westminster or up in Scotland or where it may be, just to say that you've got to make this work for the people that are actually claiming it. And if you're making it deliberately complex as a way to save money, and I'm not suggesting that because that would be quite an accusation, but you've got to simplify the process and make it accessible for people who actually need this help. So I personally think we've just seen such a huge array of different benefits that people could potentially apply to. That in itself is quite complex and complicated. And then you look at the fact that even if you look at one of those, having to fill in a form that is 10, 15 pages long for when you've got a brain injury, that's not easy, that's not accessible. So I think personally the complexity makes it equally challenging. We've just got 1 or 2 minutes, so very quickly.
A lot of people with my type of brain damage, when it says you've got to apply, I don't understand that.
Yeah.
I don't know that it's changed and I have got to reapply and I don't know how to do that now. All my benefits, I've not applied for any of them. Warriors and Digby Brown have
Yeah.
stuff. So people with brain damage need people to help.
Yeah. Completely. If you've got an advocate, whether it's a family member, whether it's a professional, whether it's your local Headway, if you've got somebody who can help you with that, it makes such a huge difference. And tragically, so many people with brain injury simply don't. And I think that's possibly one of the answers to your question, sir. Okay, I think, as I said, that you're available for the rest of the day.
If you've got any questions, burning questions now, you think of something the next wee while, please do come and find me, and I'm happy to have a chat with you.
So let's have a big round of applause for Douglas. Thank you very much indeed.